Carla Tantillo Philibert, mom of two, wife, Chicago enthusiast, and whom I have had the pleasure of watching grow this concept for all students. Please give a hand up for Carla. Thank you, Carla. I am so ready, and I know I'm supposed to be ready for like everyday mindfulness. So I'm taking my hair down and I'm all in.
I love it. I love it. And I have to say one other piece about me, a Cubs fan, even though I am very excited about our agenda today, everybody. So I'm going to be a Sox fan just for today, Sherry, but shh, don't tell anyone. Hello, friends, and welcome, welcome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All righty. Give me 1 second. All right. And so I'm just going to make sure that everyone can see what I've got going on here. Here we go. All right. So welcome, friends. I am so glad and honored and excited that you are with me today. So again, my name is Carla Tantillo Philibert. I'm the founder of Mindful Practices. I may be a familiar face to some of you. I love Illinois CEC, Sherry, Bev Johns. It's such an amazing family. And I had the privilege of keynoting CEC in the polar vortex a few years ago. And so I'm so excited to be with you again, to share some new strategies and to share some research that we collected with the University of Chicago on the impact of this work. I also want to thank Patrick and the folks that came before me. Wow, what amazing energy. What a great way to start the event. And so what's our purpose today, friends? We're going to take a look at social emotional learning with a critical lens and say, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Oh my gosh. Now what? What does social emotional learning really look like for us right now when many of us are remote, many of us are hybrid, and for our exceptional learners? How do we diversify? How do we differentiate? How do we modify? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to go back to our friend, the pop check. And I know many of you that have my books, you're familiar with the pop check, and we're going to talk about how the pop check is such an amazing strategy for us when we're thinking about yoga and mindfulness for our students. And then we're going to talk about next steps for our exceptional learners. So what supplies do you need? I'm with you for the next 45 minutes or so. If you know me, you know I love experiential learning. And so you need, of course, a laptop charger, those things to keep us going. But also if you can grab a post-it notes, a pen, a notebook, and a journal. If you don't have those things with you now, then please take a moment to go grab them, friends. Thank you. Now, I am the founder of Mindful Practices. I started Mindful Practices in 2006. I was a classroom teacher. I was a curriculum director. I saw the need for this work. I saw the need for bringing mindfulness and social emotional learning and well-being, looking at the whole child and saying, hey, how can we serve this whole child? Not just think about bell to bell, not just think about mandates or metrics, but how can we serve the needs of this whole child that's sitting in front of us? Now, as you know, my work takes me across the country and now into Mexico and Latin America. And here I am with a couple students in New Jersey. And I love working with students face to face. And so, yeah, is it hard now that we're all remote? Absolutely. Are we going to speak to that? Absolutely. Is it a different challenge to do yoga and mindfulness and social emotional learning when our students are remote, when we may or may not be face-to-face to them, or we're face-to-face, but we're every day and we have masks on? Absolutely. And we're going to acknowledge those challenges. We're going to say, this is what's hard, but this is also what's possible. Many of you are familiar with my books, my first book, Cooling Down Your Classroom, and then my series of books with Routledge, Taylor, and Francis, and then my most recent book on self-care. I'm really excited to also be looking at this work through an administrative lens. That book will be coming out next year. And I'm also doing a book study with ROE 33. So if I have any friends from ROE 33, whoop, whoop, make sure you hop in our book study. Now, this past few years, we have turned our attention to the EdTech space, knowing that mindfulness and social emotional learning and yoga wasn't accessible for all students. Not every teacher felt like they had the bandwidth, and we weren't able to reach all students in all corners and pockets of the world. And so we turned our attention to ed tech prior to the pandemic. We've been working on this with the University of Chicago for the past 3 years. I'm going to talk about some of our research and some of our findings today in the power of using technology, especially when we think about the students that we can't reach, the students that have fallen through the cracks during this difficult time, our students that may be nonverbal, our students that may have a difficult time when we think about processing time around emotions, around feelings. And so what we did with Class Catalyst is we took the check-in, check-out system that many of us are familiar with, PBIS, and we modified that system to make it work for all students and all teachers and all stakeholders every day. So I'm going to talk about that tool a little bit more. What we also did is we took a bunch of our content, our mindfulness and our yoga classes that we provide, everything from like 30 minutes down to 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and we made that into an online calendar. The reason I share these resources with you is I want you to know that those resources are out there. You've got my email address. I'll make sure I get it to you at the end. And so if you need strategies and solutions and resources, please reach out to me. Friends of Illinois CEC, friends of CEC, close to my heart. We'll make something work for you. And so we're going to start with a pop check. Now, what is a pop check? A pop check is a moment in time when we get to pause, own whatever we're experiencing, and practice. Pause, own whatever we're experiencing, and practice. And so we're going to practice this a few times over the course of the next 45 minutes together. The same way that I'm hoping and encouraging you to practice this strategy with your students. Because when we think about social emotional learning and mindfulness, I know many of us are like, yeah, we believe it, we're in. But then we think, okay, but now what? What does it look like right now? And so what we're going to do is we're going to practice this pop check strategy in this remote setting. And then we're going to talk about how to modify that for your learners. How can we differentiate this pop check strategy to meet the needs of your learners? To meet the needs of your learners that are nonverbal, to meet the needs of those learners that you can't be in the room with. So we're going to talk about that. So let's get started, friends. First, for our pop check, we're going to scooch to the edge of our chairs. We're going to find some stomps, and some movement with the feet. Now, why start with movement with the feet? Because our trauma therapist that we have in-house, Lara Vian, tells us that often when our students are dysregulated, meaning they're in fight, freeze, or flee mode, that will often say to them, okay, calm down, okay, relax. We give them cues for that intellectual brain. And many of us practitioners, I'm sure you're nodding your heads, we know that that just doesn't work in the moment. Our students can't engage with us in a conversation about calming down or why they need to calm down. That isn't accessible to them. And so what we do by engaging with movement and rhythm in the body is we pull our students out of that fight, flight, freeze, or flee mode, and we bring them back into the body, into the present moment. And so what I'm going to ask of you now is to join me for a few stomp with the feet. Beautiful. Let's do that again. Stomp with the feet. Beautiful. Now, I love a cupped hand clap. Those of us that work with students with autism know that a clap can be loud and sometimes triggering or dysregulating for our students. And so if we go with a cupped hand clap, right, we're getting that movement in the body. So give me now, friends, 5 cupped hand claps. Beautiful. Give me some stomps. Excellent. And so what we do for our pop check is we pause and we get into the body. Then we find what we're going to do with the hands. For our purposes today, given that we've had such a week with the election, right? Regardless of what side of the aisle we're on, I'm guessing we're all carrying a little bit of stress. And so what we're going to do, friends, is we're going to make fists with the hands and we're going to ball up into a little ball. And then we're going to release with a shake it out. Shake. Let's try that again. Fist with the hands, ball up into a little ball. You got this. And then when you're ready, shake it out. Shake. Excellent. So how do we start by pausing and getting into the body? Now, I just gave you 3 modifications, 3 different ways to a cupped hand clap. Did you like the fists and ball up and shake it out? And so jotting down on paper now thinking about the needs of our students and how we can differentiate. What can you best model for your students? A cupped hand clap is easy to see. If our students are remote, that's a great thing to model. And so again, thinking about the needs of the particular population that we're serving and how we can modify what we're covering right now in our session to meet the needs of our students. And so again, we had 3 ways to pause and get into the body. Stomp, 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 which is great, but also something that students can't see in remote learning. So that option might not work for us. We had the cupped hand clap. We also had make fist, ball up into a little ball, and then shake it out. Beautiful. And so when we pause, again, because we want to engage in trauma-informed practices here with our mindfulness and with our social emotional learning. When we pause, we ask our students to get into the body. Next, we take a few breaths. Now, those of you who've practiced with me before, you know that I love a hand on the belly and a hand on the collarbone. So here, I'm showing you now a hand on the belly and a hand on the collarbones. So when we breathe, we're not just thinking of breathing into the belly, but instead we're thinking of breathing into that hand on the belly and then also that hand on the collarbones, which raises our spine up tall. Now, noticing how I just demonstrated that for us now. And again, adding to your notes, what would work for your students? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Do we need a visualization to go along with these instructions? Would you have a slide, a picture of you potentially with hand on the belly, hand on the collarbones, knowing what works for you? Now, am I taking a moment at the very start of our session to unpack this? You betcha. Because those of you who've been with me before, you know that my job here and the reason Sherry invited me back is because I'm going to give you practical tools to use the second that you hop off this call, the second that this amazing conference experience is done today. That's my job. And so I want to make sure that we walk through this slowly and with intention so you can take what works for you and bring that to your students. And so again, hand on the belly, hand on the collarbones, a few breaths here. Let's inhale, friends, for the count of 4 and exhale a little bit longer for the count of 5. So we're inhaling now, hand on the belly, hand on the collarbones, inhaling for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, pausing, exhaling for the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now you'll notice, friends, the hand signals that I'm using. Does that work for you? Would you want a visual timer on the screen for your students? Let's try that again. Inhaling for the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pausing. Exhaling for the count of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll do that one more time together. This time I won't talk through it. Let's notice how that alters the experience for you. And if that works for you from an auditory perspective. Here we go. Inhaling. Beautiful. Beautiful. So now, friends, the next part of our pop check is to own it. We give our feelings, whatever we're experiencing right now in this moment, words. Now, for us as adults, I'm going to ask you to just simply think about naming what you're experiencing without judgment. And so if you're saying tired, then, oh, well, it's my fault. I mean, I went to bed so late. I was up still watching CNN. No judgment attached. Just name whatever your experience might be. Think of yourself, bird's eye view. You're simply peeking down, looking. What do you see? You're worried, you're tired, you're stressed, you're blissful, you're happy, you're joyous. naming what you can in your mind if you'd like, because journal and paper is right there, jotting those things down, just noticing and putting a name to these things, whatever comes up. Now, it's really important, friends, that when we talk about this process, that we don't get hung up on the semantic pieces. Well, am I mad or am I sad? Am I morose or am I depressed? That game of semantics is not a game I'm interested in for us as adults or for our students. I think that's the rabbit hole that sometimes we go down with social emotional learning. Can students accurately label their emotions? Well, we're never going to be able to crack open the old noggin and look in there and be like, no, Jimmy, you're really morose, bud, not depressed. Sorry about that. No, for me as an adult, I'm 44 years old. I don't know the difference. And so again, looking at the process, and as my research partner will always say, the power is in the practice of naming. The power is in the practice of students and adults finding their voice, pausing to notice what's happening with them, cultivating that awareness. That's where the power is. The power isn't in the accurate label of emotions, but instead being able to pause and know and get to know our bodies, cultivate that powerful self-awareness. And then last, we find that practice. Now, you might want to, once you say like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty stressed. I need a 4-5 breath. Great. Oh my gosh, I'm pretty excited. I'm going to do some jumping jacks. Great. But you'll notice here that the practice can be something you're familiar with, like a 4-5 breath that we just walked through, or you can name whatever practice you want for your students, depending upon their environment, depending upon their level of mobility, depending upon what's accessible for them. And so what I'll often do when I'm working with students and adults is I'll give them 4 or 3 different practices to choose from. I'll have pictures of myself doing the practices and I'll have those up on the screen. And so that way students know they're not right or wrong for choosing a particular practice, but instead their job is to notice what's going on in the body and then to cultivate an awareness of what serves them. Wonderful. So again, that's our pop check. We walked through it with some detail. We are going to practice it again in our session, but I want to make sure that we talk differentiation as we go. I also want to encourage you to put questions in the chat to me, and I'll make sure that I answer those, if not right now, at the end of the session. So give me your email address if you can. All right, friends, so here we go. Now let's take a moment to share. Let's take a moment to build that community, to build that social awareness that is so important with social emotional learning. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to find that phone, which I'm guessing is nearby, and find your favorite photo from the past 8 months. Now, have the past 8-9 months been really hard? Absolutely. Have they been filled with stress and tons of negative emotions? Absolutely. But has there also been possibility for us? Possibility to potentially spend more time with loved ones, with family members? And maybe not, but maybe that possibility was to spend more time in nature. Maybe that possibility was to get to know our kids, our own kids in a different way, or to get to know elderly folks that were in our care in a different way. And so what I'm going to ask you to do now is to text, find your favorite photo from the past 8 months, a photo that in the midst of all of this challenge brought you joy. And I'd like you to text it to me or text it to a coworker. All right, so text it to me or text it to a coworker now. So phones are not, oh, I'm getting some photos. They are coming in. Awesome. Oh my gosh. Beautiful photo. Family, nature path. Love it. Keep them coming, friends. Keep them coming. And now, in fairness, right? Vulnerability. Here we go. Yep. Here's me. My family, my mom, we moved in with my parents at the start of COVID, at the start of the pandemic, and my mom made me clean out the junk drawer in my old bedroom, right? Which hadn't been touched. Found an old pool pass. Found a photo of me with these fabulous Sally Jesse Raphael glasses on. She was a big toast to town. I was terrible at softball. So there it is. And then this is a photo of me that really, oh gosh, brought me back and touched my heart. This is me as a rookie teacher practicing yoga, practicing crow pose with my students. These were high school students at the time in Little Village, where I started a high school many years ago. And so finding these photos, and even though we are stressed, we have family members in and out of the hospital, My 94-year-old grandmother had a 3-week stint. Even though there were very stressful times, there were these moments of joy, these pockets of joy where I have my 2-year-old, my 5-year-old next to me, and I can share these photos and say, hey, share a little bit of my history that truthfully, had there not been the pandemic and we were on lockdown with my parents, probably never would have showed them my old pool pass or a photo of me doing yoga with students. Oh, I've got more photos coming in. Oh, with sunflower. These are lovely friends. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. And so as we're moving from this moment of joy, right? Taking a moment and saying, hey, yes, there have been joyous times. I'm going to ask that we commit to some things on paper as well. Why? Because cultivating this awareness of self, how we are, how we process joy during tough times, how we process negative emotions during tough times. Cultivating that awareness of self is the bedrock of social emotional learning. If we look at our own experience as educators, and by educators, I mean every caring adult that works with youth and teaches youth how to be in the world, or if we think about our experience as adults and our own self-care needs. Our self-care needs as adults are more important now than ever. Now, I want to make sure that I pause right before we hop into this activity on that note and say, your self-care is important, not just in conjunction with student need, not just in conjunction with achievement. And so often when we talk about educator self-care, we say, oh, well, look at the numbers. And if we spend 10 minutes on educator self-care, we get these percentile point growth and blah, 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 blah. Right, friends, we do 100%. But your needs are important just because. Your needs are important because you're important. Because you're a human being in the world. Now, do you do amazing work? Absolutely. But your self-care isn't important just because you serve kids. Your self-care is important because you're important. And so it's really important that we take time as folks and say, okay, what are my challenges? What are the things I'm celebrating? So that way I can get to cultivate that awareness for myself, because odds are good, friends. You've spent the past 8, 9 months focused on everyone's needs around you. Your mothers, your caregivers, your educators, your fathers, your sons, your husbands, your sisters, your brothers. You're wearing so many hats and speaking to this group, especially that I know and love. I know hearts are out there, friends. You're burning that midnight oil. But what we need to do is pause and take care of you for a smidge. So we're going to do that right now. You've got paper, you've got a journal. What you're going to do is you're going to trace your hand. You're going to trace your hand. Now, as we're doing this, we're engaging in that split vision. Of course, if I was going to use this activity with a student, with students, whether it's one-on-one or I'm working with students in a group setting, how would I modify? Of course, that's natural. We're going to be thinking those thoughts. But what I also want us to encourage us to do is try to be present in the activity for us as well. Now, inside the hand, I want you to write all the positive things that you're celebrating. And outside the hand, I want you to work through all the challenges. Time management, because who's got the time? We're remote, we're hybrid, it's really like 2 jobs. What are we doing? We're stressed about the election. Yeah, for sure. And so jotting down the challenging things and owning them and saying, yes, it's okay to be PO'd about this. It's okay to be mad or angry about this, getting it on paper. And then say, but it's also okay to celebrate these things. To celebrate these things. I finally had time to learn another language. I finally had time to connect with my kids at home or to visit my elderly grandmother. And so notice what we're celebrating, notice what our challenges are. I'm going to put a little bit of music on. We have exactly 60 seconds, friends, from when the music starts. So here we go. Music is on. Here we go. Looking at 20 more seconds, friends. All righty. So wrapping it up and taking a peek now, what do we see on the paper in front of us? What do we see on the paper in front of us? Now, the hard part with mindfulness and the hard part with social emotional learning, when we think about the awareness of self, is leaving that judgment over here, like we talked about. Like, can we be present in this moment without being judged, without judging what we're experiencing? Well, I shouldn't write this down because so-and-so has it worse than I do, has it tougher, has it this, that happened. Really thinking about placing judgment here and saying, this is my experience right now. And my job is just to be aware. It's not to think of how I can be better. It's not to play Mr. or Miss Fix-It. It's just, how can I be aware in this moment? And if I'm aware in this moment, then I'm better able to meet my own needs. And if I can get my students to be aware in this moment, then they can better meet their needs, which is why we practice the pop check the way that we do. We pause, we own what we're feeling, and we think of a practice. Because what the fabulous, wonderful Viktor Frankl told us is students and adults need space between stimulus and response. And the more space that we can cultivate as adults between stimulus and response, and the more space that our students can cultivate between stimulus and response, the more empowered we are as human beings because we're given choice. How often do we see our students make an impulsive choice? And we see the guilt and the shame wash over them. How often do we as adults make an impulsive choice and we feel that guilt and the shame? It's not what we meant to do, but it still happened. I do this work for a living. Still roll my eyes at my mother-in-law friends. It still happens at least once a year. Nah. And so thinking about, how do we create that space for ourselves? How do we create that space for our students? Now, does it take time? Yes. Is it going to happen overnight? No way. Is it like, oh, we do an activity like this, or we do the pop check, check the box, great, we're done? Nope. The power is in the practice, activities like this over time, pop checks over time, tools like Class Catalyst and SEL On Demand, where we're getting students these tools via technology every day. The power is in the practice, and it's a slow process, but that cultivation of awareness serves our students for a lifetime. So they're able to regulate not just when they're with us, but they're able to regulate in a home setting. They're able to regulate later on in life when they may or may not be in the workforce and are going to need those skills. And so thinking about this social emotional learning work, not as a box to check, not as a curriculum that we buy, but really seeing the long game and saying, what do we want for our students as lifelong learners? We want them, as Viktor Frankl says, to find that space between stimulus and response, to not feel victimized by their own impulsivity. And to do that, we cultivate awareness of self. So again, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness, is our friend John Kabat-Zinn told us, is paying attention on purpose in the present moment. Without judgment, without the inner critic, nope. Just saying, hey, what's my experience right now, and owning that. If you're angry, you're angry. If you're sad, you're sad. It's okay to feel these emotions. What's not okay is to roll your eyes at your mother-in-law, Carla, to punch the kid next to you, Jonathan. And so what we need to do is say, process, here's the space, process what's happening. Now, why does breath work? Why do we come back to breath work? Why do people talk about breath work and mindfulness? Because the breath is something that we can control. And thinking about the words of my trauma therapist on my team, the breath brings us back to the body. Regardless of our circumstance, our breath is something that we can control. And so if we can connect to the physical body with the stomp, 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 if we can pause and find our breath, we regain a sense of control that in some cases, especially when we're dysregulated, can be lost or feel lost. So what's a great way to practice this just day to day for you? Just for you, not you as an educator, not you as someone that works with youth in the world. Get out in nature. Now, this is a picture of beautiful New Hampshire, working with schools out there. Walk down your city block, friends. Walk in your own backyard. I saw pictures of sunflowers and wonderful nature. Notice things. Describe things without judgment. Leaves, lake, trees. And if you can practice observing things in nature, then you can also practice observing your own mind in the same way. I love that as a practice for students, by the way. I think it can be something they do when they sit outside or they look out the window, something that is easily accessible with remote learning as well. Cueing your students to walk to the window, cueing your students to walk and open the door if possible. Really thinking about how you can make some of these tools, if they don't have access to nature, accessible to them even with photos of nature that are on the screen, just like I did right now. Now, again, our definition of social emotional learning, we've been talking about it a lot. I want to make sure that all of us have kind of that like, yep, here's the definition, got it. This is the Castle definition from 2018. I know many of us are familiar with Castle. And you'll notice a few things here. Mainly what I've highlighted, social emotional learning is for children and adults, and that it's a process. Again, it's not a curriculum we buy. Are there SEL curricula out there? Yes. Yes, there are. Are they great? Absolutely. But the process of social emotional learning, that process is supplemented by all those curricular tools. Why? Because it's contextual. My ability to be self-aware, as I mentioned to you, I can do that right now presenting because presenting is my jam. I'm doing 2 or 3 of these a day. Feel good. Being with my mother-in-law, which happens just a couple times a year, that's a different context for me. I need more practice in that space. And so my ability to be self-aware shifts depending upon the context I'm in. The same with our students. Many of our students respond to and thrive in structured environments, especially when we think about exceptional learners. Our exceptional learners, some of them have struggled during this time because structure and consistency and routines and protocols and procedures have been broken. And so, of course, it's going to be more difficult for our students to regulate because the awareness they cultivated in this context now needs to be cultivated in a brand new context. And that has to be practiced over time. Now, many of you are nodding, I'm sure, saying, oh, absolutely. I've seen this with my autistic students. I've seen, absolutely. But giving ourselves that same patience as well, because our routines and procedures have been disrupted. And so saying for ourselves, social emotional learning is a process in giving ourselves grace. For our students, social emotional learning is a process in giving ourselves grace. As with anything that we really know, the more we know about it, the more we get how complex it is. Social emotional learning is no exception to that. So moving away from thinking about mastery, can I master SEL and check the box? Can I do it at Wednesday in 2:15 and say, look, it's done? No, friends, no. Those are wonderful tools for teaching social emotional learning concepts. Concepts like bullying, empathy, very important. But the process takes place over time and is practiced. And so when we talk about social emotional learning, there's a couple competencies that we hear everyone talk about quite a bit. Self-awareness, self-regulation, social awareness. Regardless of what framework you use, Castle's framework, the framework my research partner developed at University of Chicago, the core districts out of California, wherever you're operating from, these three are basically like the bread and butter. And then we all disagree on those other competencies and whether they're linear, whether they're circular, like those are other pieces. But when we think about social emotional learning, the bedrock is self-awareness, self-regulation and management, or social awareness. Where does it all start? Self-awareness, as we've talked about, because you can't manage behavior that you're not aware of. How often have we said to a student, oh my gosh, Sarah, my dear, why did you do that again? And Sarah will turn to us and say, well, I don't know, Miss T. She didn't know. She doesn't know. We've never given her the space to, as Ross Green says, looking at the root cause of her behavior. She's just behaving a certain way because she wants to please us or not get in trouble or please mom and dad. And so what we have to do is give Sarah that space to cultivate that awareness of stimulus and response. So what is SEL, friends? Is it A, B, C, or D? Is it A, B, C, or D? So right now, throw it in the chat. What do we think? A little quiz, if you will. Get our fingers moving. Is it A? Is it B? Is it C? Is it D? Throwing it in the chat. What do we see? What are people popping up here? Is it a combo of A and C? What are we seeing? What are we seeing? Now, who practices social emotional learning? Whose job is it to practice social emotional learning? Well, friends, you've heard me say it. It's everyone's job. Everyone that teaches students how to be in the world, which is you, which is me, which is Sherry, which is Patrick, which is our school social worker, which is our paraprofessionals. We have trained, my organization, Mindful Practices, has trained over 1,000 paraprofessionals since the pandemic started in social emotional learning. One of those reasons is schools are starting to identify the importance and the power of paraprofessionals is support for our educators, our students. And so understanding that every caring adult is responsible for SEL, not just this person or that person. Now, what's the elephant in the room here? What's the thing that keeps us from practicing this? Well, time. Who's got the time, right? Who's got the time? I get it. I get it. There's anxiety around this. What about all this learning loss that people are talking about? What about this? What about that? What about all the operations of running schools right now? 100% true. And change. Gosh, there's so much change around me. Do I have to change what I'm teaching too? Friends, I feel you. I feel you. But as Albert Einstein tells us, in every crisis, right there in the middle, in the midst of it, there lies an opportunity. There were things we needed to do better before the pandemic, and we all kind of knew it, but it was just the way things were. Now is this opportunity for that change. This is exciting for that reason. It shouldn't stay business as usual because some of our students were falling through the cracks. How many tier 2 learners did we lose? So many of our schools that are using Class Catalyst, our online platform, are feeling this amazing sense of relief because they're finally able to connect with those tier 2 learners that were just kind of nebulously in the system before. I know many of us feel that. Like, gosh, we've never been able to get online with a student or that student. What do we do? How do we connect? So these questions, those questions that are waking us up at 3 a.m, while they're heavy and while they cause anxiety, there is this moment that we're in to find real solutions. And together we can. And so with everything going on right now, and we're saying it out loud, there's a lot going on right now. There's a ton going on right now. We have the election. We have the pandemic. We have the systemic racial injustice in our country that was present long before now. For some of us, it's newly visible, but it's been present for many families and communities for a long time. Now is our time, as I mentioned, to say, hey, there are things we need to change. And so what we have to do as a community, as educators, is say, how do we find the time? What do we prioritize right now? What's our North Star? What are our big rocks? And so I'm going to share a little video that we made as an organization that we share during professional developments with schools across the country to help us say, yes, in this moment of change, how do we find our big rocks and stick to those big rocks? and not get sucked back into the minutia of what once was that didn't serve us and all of our students anyway. And so right now, friends, with your journal nearby, we're going to watch this quick video, and I'm going to ask you, as you're here, to jot down what your big rocks are. What speaks to you? What are your North Stars during this time?
There's a well-known story about a university professor that wanted to make a point about the importance of prioritizing how we spend our time. The professor stood in front of his class with a display of items. He took a large, empty jar and filled it with rocks, approximately 2 inches in diameter. He then asked the class if the jar was full, and they agreed, yes, the jar was full. The professor then took a box of pebbles and added them to the jar and gave it a little shake to move the pebbles into the open areas around the rocks. The professor asked the class again if the jar was full. They agreed, yes, it is full this time. The professor then took a box of sand and added it to the jar, filling the spaces between the rocks and the pebbles. He asked again, now, is the jar full? They laughed and agreed, yes, it's full. This jar represents your life. The big rocks signify the really important things in your life, such as health, family, and friends. The pebbles are the other things that matter in your life, such as work or school. And the sand signifies the remaining small stuff, such as material possessions. Now, if you were to reverse the order of filling the jar and add the sand first, there would not be enough room for the rocks and the pebbles. The same principle applies to your life. If you spend too much time on the small stuff, you won't have enough space or time to focus on the things that are truly important, the big rocks. So, prioritize the big rocks first. Practice self-care, spend quality time with the people you love, and the rest is just pebbles and sand. They will always find some space.
And so right now, friends, noticing where you are, writing down your big rocks, whatever those might be. And thinking about those for yourself. What are your big rocks for yourself? How can you buy time for self-care for you? Now, if we have any administrators with us, and I know that we do, administrators, I'm going to ask you, what can you take off teachers' plates, educators' plates, adult stakeholders' plates right now? Now, what we're encouraging many of our school partners to do is take that precious PLC time and devote some of that time to self-care. Don't make self-care the thing that happens at 3:30 and people have to get childcare and then they feel guilty for doing it or guilty for not, but say this is time that's set aside. This is time to use for self-care. And then those of us that are working with students, what are our big rocks for them? When we think life skills, when we think lifelong learning skills, what are the skills that our students need right now in this COVID moment? In this moment of racial injustice in our country that's been going on a long time. In this election moment that we're having, political and strife that's been going on a long time. What skills do our students need? Now, taking a look at data, friends, this is data that we collected with one of our school districts we've been working with. And you'll notice here on the adult competency, these adults in this district, and it's an amazing, beautiful, fabulous district, by the way, they're the A++, goal setting, teamwork, 53% of them feel, wow, we're rock stars. But when we look at things like body awareness and managing stress and anxiety, the adults are saying, hey, we need help here. There's only 13% of us that feel like we've got that down. So the need is there. The need is there for us first as adults to take care of us. And also to say, hey, if you're expecting me to be emotionally available to take care of my students, you got to give me some time for me too. And so when we think about a pop check, what does a pop check sound like? A pop check for us can sound the same as how we're going to model it for students. We pause, we find our feet, we roll our shoulders back, we own what we need in that moment. We practice a 4-5 breath, a box breath, a doodle. And then we think about what frequency do I practice with my students? Once a day, multiple times a day? How do I message this explicitly to my students when you're dysregulated? How do I say, hey, I'm dysregulated this morning. The dishwasher broke and the coffee maker's on the fritz. I need a pop check, everyone. So how do we model these strategies for our students, but also take care of our own needs as well? Now we're going to practice a box breath together. You've got journals there, or if you'd like, you can trace a finger just like I'm going to in the sky. Again, this is how I model this strategy for students. This can be done verbally, non-verbally. Notice where you are. We're going to inhale, down, exhale to the side, inhale up, exhale to the side. Are we ready? Finding our feet, stomp, 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 rolling our shoulders back. And then inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale, slow it down. As you're here, noticing what comes to mind. Do your big rocks come to mind? Beautiful, friend. Beautiful. So making sure in our notes, we jot that down. We have box breath. We have 4-5 breath. We have our hand. We have our pop check. Now, as we close, remembering here, the power is in the practice, not how many different practices you have. Don't scroll through YouTube for 800 different links on mindfulness strategies. That doesn't get the job done. Not for you, not for the students. Don't send each other 800 links. Notice I'm not even using links with you. I'm having you jot things down on a journal. I want you away from the phone and away from checking email. I want you present here with me. Try more analog with your students when you can, and relying on vetted ed tech tools like Class Catalyst, like other things that are out there that have been vetted by a university when you need ed tech too. Know your practice, what you're going to say, know how you're going to say it, and know when you're going to practice. So it's consistent, so we can provide our students with the structure that they're missing right now. Now, what's wonderful about tools like a pop check is that you can use that pop check now, remote, hybrid, and then one day when we get over this, whatever it is, and we're back in person, whatever that looks like. These tools are lifelong learning tools and can look like this consistently, whether we're remote, whether we're hybrid, whether we're in person. And that's huge, because what we want is to give our students tools that will feed them, take care of them, feed us, take care of us, and then not change it up on them in 6 months. And so notice how you're going to deliver this pop check, when you're going to deliver this pop check, how you're going to explain the why behind this pop check, and then practice it with consistency and fidelity. Now, I love books too. And for those of you that say, yeah, pop check's not my thing, then find some books and use the power of books to open up the window to self-awareness. Jabari Jumps is an amazing example. Jabari talking about fear and his dad saying, let's take some breaths together. And so if we can't practice pop checks, then let's practice reading books with our students and talking and narrating our own experiences around fear. Now, again, I want to encourage you to reach out to me if I can support you with resources. And I also want to make sure that we have this pop check here. If you want to take a picture with your phone, closing with this pop check, noticing there's different ways we can try itsy bitsy spider breath together. There's different ways to practice your pop check and finding that. So can you find your feet right now? Can you roll your shoulders back? Can you close with this itsy bitsy spider breath? Focusing on these fingers and breathing. And as we close there, I'm going to give you my email address and I'm going to say to you, friends, let's chat more. This session isn't just a one and done. It's not just here, me talking about SEL and mindfulness and giving you some tools. It's the start of our journey together. If we're not connected, then let's get connected. If I can't answer your question, somebody on my team can. I'm here to support you. Thank you for having me. It has absolutely been a privilege and an honor. Please reach out. I'm here. Thank you so much. Thank you to Sherry. Thank you to AJ and the team. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Take care.